Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the City Planning, Economic Development and Environment Committee meeting of the 14th of May 2025. I declare this meeting open at 9 a.m, and I'd like to advise attendees in the room that this meeting is being webcast and audio recorded. I'd like to begin today's meeting by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land in which we're gathered and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I believe we have an apology from Councillor Bannon and we have a leave of absence from Councillor Fraser. There is a motion on the board. Do we have a mover for that motion? Councillor Hall, do we have a seconder? Councillor St Ledger, all those in favour? That has been carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Confirmation of the previous committee meeting minutes. There's now a motion displayed on the screen. Do I have a mover? Sorry. Sorry. Mayor Bannon, do I have a second? Sorry, Mayor Raven. You throw me out. Thanks, sorry, Mayor Raven. Seconded by Councillor Hall. All those in favour? That has been carried. Okay, declarations of conflicts of interest. I now refer to declarations of conflict of interest. Do any councillors wish to declare a conflict today? There being none, we will move on to general business. Councillors, do we have any general business for the Health, Climate and Conservation Manager, Mr. Brett Esbenson? No, Brett, do you have any for us?
Through the chair, no, I do not.
Wonderful. You enjoy the rest of your day. Do we have any general business for the Development Assessment Manager, Mr. Stephen Ball? No, Stephen, do you have any for us?
Through the chair, no, I don't.
Wonderful. You enjoy your day also. And last but not least, do we have any GB for the Waste and Resource Recovery Manager, Mr. Michael Asnakar? No? Michael, do you have any for us?
No, I don't today.
Wonderful. You can go back to your day also. Have a great day. Nice and easy. All right, we have two reports today, and we will begin with item 6.1, the UN Habitat Quality of Life Initiative Pioneer City Outcome and Way Forward. I note 6.1 is a public report with a confidential attachment. Proposed resolution to move into confidential is displayed on the screen. Do any councillors wish to move into a closed session for this item? Yeah, sure, certainly.
Can someone explain why there's a confidential attachment to it? I read the document and it didn't appear to...
Yeah, through the chair. So there's an opportunity that's being afforded to the Mayor and to senior staff on the back of this initiative. Now, that's an external organisation who's providing that opportunity and they're not in a position yet to release details publicly of what that looks like. So they've asked us to place it under embargo until that time.
Thank you, Dave. So no one wants to move into confidential? No? Okay, all right. I'll refer to the Director of Growth, Economy and Sustainability, Mr. Dave Hanson, to speak to the report.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, councillors. I'm going to take the report largely as read because there's a lot of detail in there. But what I would just like to point out is Council's been involved in this initiative for about a year now, so it's just ticked over a year. We joined with 8 other cities and it's now scaled to almost 70 cities around the world. So the hopes of the organising, the sponsoring agency have come to fruition that there's now an incredible amount of data being collected around the world on quality of life parameters across a very wide and diverse range of cities. So the report summarises Council's involvement, why we got involved, which there's been multiple reports dealing with this initiative. It actually presents the outcomes of the data. So what we call the data stories are all appearing in attachment 1. And there's a range of things that we measured both at a global and a local scale. Some of the stories and the outcomes of that data analysis and collection have reinforced the things that we know about Logan, and others have challenged the traditional sort of stories that we tell ourselves about the place. So the one that I use is typically the thought that the east-west public transport isn't anywhere near as good as the north-south because of that feeling we have around the connections to Brisbane and the Gold Coast and the north-south nature of the heavy rail and the busway. Well, it's about 70% as good. East-west is about 70% as good as the north-south. So whilst that in one way corrects the story that we tell ourselves. It gives us a little bit of a heads up because the growth is going to the west largely and to the southwest. So over time, you would expect that when we remeasure this indices, that parameter, that measurement, would actually go down unless a disproportionately high level of new investment goes into correcting that east-west imbalance. So perhaps not as bad as we thought it was at the moment, but that's because the growth hasn't hit yet. So it provides a real precursor to the sort of advocacy position that Council should be taking and the investments that we should be making. The report also deals with our participation in the Quality of Life Conference in Cairo in November last year, and also the related World Urban Forum number 12 in the same location. So I'll leave it to the Mayor. The Mayor may want to speak about what that involvement looked like. The report deals with what that consisted of and what the outcomes around the call to Cairo was. The report finally just deals with a few of the ongoing relationships that we formed with some of those other pilot cities, the sponsor organisation, how we might try to use some of this, or we will be trying to use some of this into the Transform Logan program of work. So we couldn't measure everything, nor pursue everything that we wanted to under this program, but there's a lot of relevance to the Transform Logan initiative. And I would say that there's a long list of things that we would like to pursue over a much longer period of time than 1 year to scoop up those opportunities. So with all that said, I'd like to take questions if there are any.
Thank you, Dave. I have Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, through the chair. I just want to ask a question in relation to what you said, Dave, about the transportation. Did you just say that, could you just clarify, that we've got to focus on the west? Is that correct?
One of the things that we decided to measure in the indices was this idea that there's an imbalance with the way that the public transport operates through the city. And we often, like I myself, tell others and have told others over time that north-south public transport links are much, much, much better than those that run between the east and the west. What the data analysis and the access that we got to TransLink's tap-on, tap-off point of origin data actually showed a slightly different...
Excuse me. Sorry. Yep.
Actually showed a slightly different story, which was, I think the attachment one says it's about 0.78 or 78% as good in the east and west as it is in the north and south. So I was expecting personally that number might be down as around 50% as good as what the north-south links look like. So that's what it was trying to measure. So, and my comment about to the west was that Greater Flagstone, southwest to Yarrabilba, that's where the growth pressure is largely coming from.
Yeah.
So over time, whilst it doesn't appear to be as bad, those east-west linkages at the moment, we just need to keep an eye on it because the growth numbers are going to drop in much bigger numbers out there.
So it's not a focus in the immediate future?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. I have Councillor Wilcox and then Councillor Murphy.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave. I found it really interesting to read, especially attachment 1. So if I can refer to you to attachment 1, specifically, I'll start on page 25, and it is in regards to the public transport. So I don't quite understand the figures. That's all. So I'm just trying to understand them, especially like Flagstone, Munrooban, Flagstone, Greenbank, North Maclean. Like, I don't understand those figures and what they represent. So you've got population access to public transport, total population, and then percentage. Can you just explain what the figures actually mean?
Just if draw your attention back one page on 24, so there's a under that 1.1.2, it confirms that it's measured by a spatial analysis, so a mapping analysis of the proportion of the population that live within 500 metres to a low capacity service such as a bus, or within 1,000 metres to a high capacity service as a train. So then you're mapping that comparative advantage and disadvantage based on the population in each of those, what we call an SA2 area, which is often just a bit bigger than a suburb.
So is it then saying like Greenbank, North Maclean, only 709 residents have access to public transport within that 500 and 1,000? Is that what that means then?
Yeah, so as you move from Logan Central, which intuitively you would think with the heavy rail and a variety of TransLink bus services is better connected and comparatively better advantaged, as you move down, then by suburb, that's what it's trying to tell you, that advantage decreases.
Okay, got it. I think I still find some of those figures hard to believe, but anyway. Question. Sorry, I'm just trying to find my other question that I had.
I
Councillor
think,
Lane?
sorry, point of order. I think the thing is it's a number of people within a distance of a stop. It's not saying that number of people are catching public transport.
And then table 7 on page 31, and it's about the nighttime expenditure per capita. Can you explain what that one means?
Yes, through the chair. So once again, back one page. So we're measuring what we call the spend map escape. So spend map is a third-party provider of credit card data as a share of the total resident wallet in dining and entertainment for each of those locations. So the summary on page 30, is that what you're referring to? Which summarise... Well, the summary on page 30 actually summarises a table. It might be a little bit easier for you to understand the intent of it. So residents from Logan Central spend more on nighttime expenditure outside of the region compared to the region. So this is measuring the leakage of the dollar. So for every $1 spent outside of Logan, only 40 cents will be spent in areas like Crestmead, Eagleby, Kingston, because the nighttime economy offering is much less in those locations. Whereas if you compare that to a place like Underwood, which is much better connected to places like Sunnybank and the southern parts of Brisbane, that spend outside the city goes to 70. The spend inside Underwood goes to 70 cents because there's also more of an offering within Underwood itself. So what that tends to tell us is if you're looking to invest in nighttime economy in any of these locations, we can immediately get a view of where is undersupplied with great businesses open after 5 o'clock of an evening. So if you were to make an investment or to try to attract a great bar or restaurant or cafe, you would potentially target your investment down to that suburb level rather than just, I guess where people are spending their money and how they're spending it inside and outside the city.
I'd probably like to keep having a conversation offline because I actually do find some of these figures really hard to understand, and I'm a bit dumbfounded that in Flagstone, you know, the spend is 30,000 and in Beenleigh it's 32,000. There's a world of difference between those two suburbs and the nighttime economy and what's in there and where people can, Beenleigh, sorry, and where they can go, and even Browns Plain. So I'm a bit dumbfounded that, you know, Flagstone Newbeath is 46,000. I'm like, 46 million. Yeah, like I don't quite understand those figures and how they're a real true representation of that area. So
Through the chair, happy
Yeah.
to spend some time with you offline.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. I have Councillor Murphy, followed by Councillor Jackson and Councillor Bradley. Did you pop your hand up? Or did you still want to speak, Councillor Lane? No, you're good. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, through the chair. Dave, again, staying page 31. Just because we want to increase our nighttime economy and keep the money here in Logan, is this statistics available to anybody that is looking to invest in the area? Can the team help out? Like we can direct them back to your way to say, hey, okay, like we pointed out, Eagleby is undercatered for. If somebody was to invest in that area, we could help them through your team?
Through the chair, unfortunately, we don't subscribe to this spend map product ongoing. So we had access to a similar tool throughout COVID to work out what's going on with the impacts of the pandemic. We've actually just got a slice of data at a point in time to do this work.
Yeah.
So happy to make that slice available and talk to businesses about exactly what that means for them and their suburb, but we don't have the live draw of data which would be available if we were an ongoing subscriber to this product. So we are investigating whether there is merit to doing that, but when we've investigated in the past, because we don't have highly defined food and beverage specific areas like a Brisbane CBD or a South Brisbane South Bank, we're not sure of the value of it when you can't get it down to those very specific locations.
And you said before that this is done by Spend Map, which is linked to the credit card. So if somebody is paying cash or a debit card or something, that we're missing that information as well.
cash we'd missed, debit card should go through the provider.
Okay, and this being having a confidential attachment, but is page 31 available, like as in the public?
Yes, it is.
Excellent, thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Murphy. I have Councillor Jackson, followed by Councillor Bradley, and then Mayor Raven.
Thanks. Dave, you mentioned the east-west capacity as a surprise. I'm glad that Berrinba is going to go from 0%, not even on the chart, to jumping in there really high with a new bus route starting this month. As an east-west connector, so that's awesome. What else surprised you out of the data, good or bad? What's caught your attention?
Through the chair, some of the health data that we track ourselves as a team. One of the metrics was that not every health service can be covered by the public health service. So my ED and CP sort of business attraction team spend a lot of time by sector. So whether that's oncology or radiography or whatever that might be, what's the offering within the city and how do we want that to grow? Because it's actually then an investment attraction target for them. So there were some elements of that which I thought would be much lower than what they are, and the growth year on year, the two-time cohorts that we tested, I didn't expect the growth in some of those services to be as high as it was. Now, it's hard to then track that down. We actually track them down to the location of a physical premises and an offering within the city. So surprising to me that some of them have grown, but very pleasing that we're tracking it in that detail, because once again, we tell ourselves a lot of stories around, well, if you need an eye specialist, you need to go to Wickham Terrace, or if you need oncology, that's not necessarily the case anymore. And the two-time cohorts actually straddled some of the investment attraction work that the team has done to in Springwood with quite a large private health service business that's dropped in there in the intervening period. You can see the impact of what council's doing and done, and I think that was a really pleasing thing for me.
That's really awesome. And in relation to that, in Berrinba again, the opening of Oceans Plus as a Samoan Pacifica culturally focused medical service has been another addition to our area that's been a massive, really well appreciated in the area. And your team was a big part of helping them find a facility that really suited the demographics. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. I have Councillor Bradley again.
Thank you so much. My hand went up when you were referring to the suburbs, and I note that Rochdale South and Priestdale, which are two suburbs that I represent, are mentioned on page 30 for expenditure per capita for nighttime economy, nighttime expenditure, sorry. Just curious, how recent is this data and how do you get access to it?
Through the chair, I think the data was 2023, 2024 data, so quite recent when you're talking about data, and anything post-pandemic is better than during the pandemic.
Yep.
How do we get access to it? So SpendMap is the company. It's a third-party business.
Mm-hmm.
There's a number of them, but they're the ones with most access to most banks. So they actually subscribe to the various banks' credit card data, and they then collate that into their own proprietary product, and then conduct analysis on the top of that to show trends based on what else is going on in society or the community, and how that spend fluctuates on the basis of those things.
Yeah.
So if we wanted access to it, we can. It's a per month kind of subscription fee, and you divide it spatially. So if you want it across the whole city, it's going to cost you more. If you decided we probably wouldn't do that, we would probably focus on our major and minor centres, and that would be less. So.
Yeah, I suppose for me, I want to see the value for money being spent in the right areas. So I would see that as a factual sort of representation of how you evaluate how effective it is. So yeah, I'd be curious to get that data.
Yeah, well, through the chair, on the back of this work, we are, our data capability as an organisation has gone up throughout this project. I don't really want to lose some of that opportunity, but you need to keep investing in it. And one part is by buying the data, the other one is having decent capability within the organisation to do something with it. So this, once again, Transform Logan is the vehicle that we're looking at to sort of inform what should our data analysis capability be? How much should we buy? What does that look like when we're making decisions? How much data and evidence do you need to make a decision in some of these realms?
I'm thinking differently because as a councillor, we sign off on LIP money, and only yesterday some LIP money went into something that will facilitate nighttime economy. So that's where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. We've got Mayor Raven and Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. The great work, Dave, and I know obviously you were there, so you saw how powerful it was. I found it really interesting. When we went over there, we knew the data sets. We were aware of the work the Quality of Life Project had done in Logan. What I didn't expect to find out was how valuable the data from other cities were, in particular comparable cities like Vancouver. The data that they were able to collect from their mobile phone network about how people move through their city and which parks that they use, the assumption that I have that people would use their local park more than any other park, and like Canadians and Australians are reasonably similar, was completely blown out of the water, and that actually most people attend their biggest, nicest, nearest park and they spend quite a bit of time there. And I would never have thought that, because I would have assumed that if you've got a park that's 500 metres down the road, that's where you're going to spend more time than anywhere else. But it turns out you're driving to an Underwood Park or to a Tygum Lagoon or somewhere like that and spending a whole day there as your primary destination, which really would be, that sort of information locally would be helpful. I know it's hard for us to get that data because telco companies prefer to share it with the UN than local governments, but I guess we just didn't, I guess there is a price for all data that we want. The councillors have been alluding to it, but I think it would be useful every sort of 3 to 4 years to just do another benchmark run of the data at our cost so we can compare to what's changing. Really good way to understand how our economy is performing, what impact investments are happening in different parts of the city. But actually being there, because the question I was asking myself before I left and that I formed an answer for when I came back was, could I have done this trip by Teams? Could I have just done a digital connection, done my speeches digitally, and could I have avoided having to travel halfway across the world? And the answer was no, because the most powerful connections were the ones that happened when I was just being flat out cheeky and tackling a Google executive, which are like unicorns. You never see them in the real, they're not real. They don't exist. When you see one in real life, you tackle her. She said, "Oh no, I'll be here for the networking afterwards." She was not. She disappeared 30 seconds after I got her business card. If I'm not there to get that business card, we can't talk to her afterwards to make sure that we've got that connection. And one of the things that I find challenging in the legislative space that we work in is that Google has all of these free tools that councils all over the world are using, really powerful, advanced, that they've spent millions of dollars developing. We can't use them because our data policies say no, all data must be kept onshore. That's not a Logan thing. That's an Australian thing, but it's so frustrating because there are tiny councils in Agadir and other places like that that are getting the benefits of these free tools, and that would make it easier for your team to be able to analyse and understand the information that's in the city and use it effectively. And we can't do it because of the legislative environment we work in. I would love to find a way to work around that, because while that connection to that Google exec was really useful, we can't get full value out of it unless we can use their tools. And the councils that we're competing with to have a great quality of life all over the world, they're using those tools and getting huge benefits in the way that they plan, in the way that they spend money, the way that they save money. So it'd be fascinating if we could find a way to be able to take advantage of that as well, because I just really feel like we're on the back foot, because there is a platform that they're deliberately making available through this project for councils who are involved, and we can't touch it, which is pretty frustrating. I know it's frustrating for you as well. So if we can figure out a way to do that, I know Rick's not in the room, but I've mentioned it to him before, that would really unlock the amount of data that we're holding in the organisation for the benefit of the community and make us a more efficient and responsive council, which would be amazing.
Thanks, Mayor Raven. Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Dave, I often suffer from domestic blindness in that I can't see what's right in front of me. But with this table on chart on page 31, is that for one financial year?
Yeah. Sorry, it's a snapshot in time.
Okay, no worries. So what this says to me is that there are areas that really do love dining out and certainly don't go without. I really appreciate this because it clearly shows that my local area is trying to spend as much as they can within their confines of their area, and I think accessibility is one of the reasons why those local numbers, like we leach out into other areas, of course, South Bank and the Gold Coast and places like that. But the Underwoods really show that a density of targeted restaurants and an entertainment precinct can really have a positive impact on the area, and Underwood certainly is doing that, and it's heavily supported by the economic team here at council. The interesting one was the crime. So the crime at a train station, and my suburbs topped the 3 out of 4 on the list. I'm just curious, the people who committed those crimes, it doesn't say whether or not they were from Logan, because we get a lot of fly-ins on the trains and they cause trouble and then they bugger off back to where they came from. So just when it comes to those numbers, it doesn't say if there's serious crime, it's just reported crime, and whether or not those people are local. So anyone reading this report, just be careful about the conclusions that you might jump to, because they could be the wrong ones.
Thank you. Through the chair, I really want to reinforce that point, because that metric was put into this indices with a lot of kind of trepidation, and it was quite hard data to source. So it was a lot of cross comparison between QR data, police data, and whatever. The intent of putting it in there was that if we want more people to live in a high density environment around train stations, and then also wrap some supporting food and bev offerings and commercial activity around them, they have to be seen as safe. And this is one where the story actually matched the outcome in my mind, where it is nowhere near as bad as the numbers aren't even as bad as what the messaging often is around Logan and the safety of those stations. Yes, there's an issue, but it's no better or worse than many of the stations around southeast Queensland. So I think it's a really important conversation that we can have on the back of the data. And next time we run the data, we wanted to use it sensitively, because we were hoping to get a finer grain of data the next time we run the indices, where maybe we can split it up between, crimes against people, crimes against property, whatever that looks like. We just couldn't quite get all the way where we wanted to. But this project was as much about advancing things incrementally in our capability in using data and asking for it, and those relationships around data as it is about the outcome of the data itself. So you raise a really important point.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. And Councillor Wilcox, you have one more question?
Thank you. Thank you for the second chop. Just want to make sure on page 25 on the breakdown of access to public transport, I'm just reflecting on it. Flagstone West, Newbeath. Flagstone West technically doesn't exist yet. And when you're looking at the map, access to public transport, SA2, that very top edge of Flagstone West / Newbeath doesn't exist yet, because there's no houses there. And I think they're probably referring to the PDA having access to train and rail, which I live within a 500 metre radius of, which doesn't exist yet. Technically, the very first house in Newbeath to have access to a public bus is at least probably 1.5 kilometres away. So I just reflecting on it, and it says 3,625 people in Newbeath have access to public transport, is a really far stretch, because I literally drive through it every day. Like, it is a 3 to 4 kilometre walk from my house to that bus stop, and the very, very first house is next to the Greenbank tip in Newbeath. So I'm just worried that they're doing desktop reviews and not actually driving it and seeing it and that sort of thing, because the population, 10,000, yeah, that's probably on the money, but 3,000 of us there do not have access within 500 metres of a bus in Newbeath.
Thanks for the question. I'm going to have to take that one on notice. Kat Guerrero from ED&CP, who did all the data analysis, has inconveniently gone on maternity leave, so she should be sitting in the back there, but she's not. So
Okay. Dave, you wanted to say a few things to finish up? No more questions, councillors? No? Okay, Lee. Finish up.
All I wanted to say was that this is a real example of projects philosophy moving forward, where fully funded by an external agency, we didn't need to gear up a service enhancement to fund the work. Discretionary effort from about a dozen people across the organisation, but a few, in particular across my directorate office, across ED&CP and Transform Logan. So I think, once again, this is about testing if you can connect the project in the hearts and minds of the staff. They really do go above and beyond for the outcome. And building, like, this was a capability that the Quality of Life program itself did not have. We co-designed and co-built it with them. So I'm very, very proud of the team. I just wanted to specifically call that out.
Thanks, Dave. A lot of interesting information there we can use, which is great. Okay, I believe we have a motion on the screen. Do I have a mover? Councillor Lane, do I have a seconder? Councillor Murphy, all those in favour? Has been carried with the exception of Councillor Jeremiah. How do you vote?
Abstain.
Thank you, councillors. Let's move on to item 6.2, infrastructure charges resolution number 12. I note 6.2 is a public report, and I will now refer to the Economic Development and City Planning Manager, Mr. Dave Radage, to please speak to the report.
Good morning, councillors. The adopted infrastructure charges resolution at a high level, just introducing that, is the tool that we use to charge infrastructure charges. So when someone does a development, they look at the infrastructure charges policy and in conjunction with our online tools and understand what infrastructure charges are payable. And annually we do update this policy. So I'll start, like I usually do, with the recommendations. So the recommendations is that the policy as attached is endorsed, and that the infrastructure charges policy commences in August this year, and that we have delegated authority to amend some of the tables in that policy, just to provide you a little bit of an insight into those tables. So those tables are the tables that dictate what an infrastructure charge is for a dwelling, for a warehouse, and annually the state will come back and allow us to increase those charges. So instead of us having to come back to council and get that re-endorsed, we're seeking delegation to amend those tables itself, because that period of time between us preparing a committee report does result in us losing a percentage of infrastructure charges. So from a value for money point of view, I think there's some efficiencies in us being able to amend those tables when the state government comes out with some changes, instead of us having to come back and get that whole policy re-endorsed. One of the things about the adopted infrastructure charges policies is that it needs to be adopted in its entirety. So that's what you see the large background paper is. So that is the complete policy itself. So the report talks to some changes that we've made to the policy. So at a high level, we've changed. There's a requirement or there's a provision where if you're a temporary development and you're temporary for 5 years, you don't need to pay infrastructure charges. We probably think that's probably a little bit too long for someone to not pay infrastructure charges, so we're wheeling that back to 3 years. Just to get technical now, there's also some changes to our conversion criteria. So if a developer builds a road and they believe it is a trunk road and it should be offset, this is when the conversion criteria comes in. So we've tightened that up. So those situations where developers are asking for local roads to be completely offset against the infrastructure charges into the millions, we've got some legal advice that really tightens that up. So when we're in court, we have good grounds to make sure that our policy is correct. One of the more significant changes, I guess it may be of interest, is for a long time we've had a infrastructure charges deferral policy for hotels. So if you're a hotel in Logan and you're a 3.5 star, you'll receive a infrastructure charges deferral. It means that the deferral means that if you're a hotel, you don't need to pay infrastructure charges. But if you change your hotel into apartments, you'd then have to pay infrastructure charges. What we've seen more recently, for example, in Logan Village, is that some developers are choosing to use the definitions of motels instead of hotels, and they're getting caught out by this infrastructure charge definition. So the proposal is that we include motels and hotels as a deferral, still meeting that 3.5 star standard, but we've just had a few situations where developers have applied for a motel, they haven't got the infrastructure charges deferral, they've had to go through DA, pay a DA fee to do a really minor change to classify it as a hotel. So that's another change. One of the reasons why we're bringing this policy to council at the moment is that the state governments released their indexation, which means that the $32,000 that we can charge for infrastructure charge at the moment goes up to something like $32,800. So very thankful for the government for giving us a extra $800 when it cost us $70,000 in the greenfield space. So as I said, the recommendations are that council endorses this policy. The recommendation is that we start the policy on the 12th of August. That just gives a little bit of time for industry to get a bit of a heads up. So risk smart consultants, people that are building granny flats understand that this change is coming. And then the third recommendation is that instead of each time us coming to council when state government graciously give us a 1% increase, we can do that automatically. So that will mean that we can automatically start charging that instead of that 2-month time period where it usually takes to put a committee report back to council. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dave. I have Councillor Bradley and then Councillor Lane.
Thank you. Through the chair, my question was about the short-term accommodation and has it been utilised, and is there specific areas of the city, or could there be specific areas of the city that you target rather than the areas where it costs more for infrastructure?
So through the chair, the priorities still predominantly remain the principal centres. The team's working with number of developers to help them understand the feasibility of developing in some of those centres. But the policy itself is a citywide policy, yes.
Right. Yeah, well...
Which has not been taken up yet.
It hasn't. Okay, that's what I wanted to ask.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. I have Councillor Lane and then Councillor Wilcox.
Thanks through you, Madam Chair. I've got no problem with the amended changes to this. I think as a punter who lives in the city who would be reading this, they would say, well, where's my protections in this? A good example is in Thompson Avenue. We've got a ratepayer who's lived there for 40 years and infill started to happen around him. So what's happened is there's a 900 square block behind him, and the owner has decided to rip down the little 2-bedder cottage that's there, and he's thrown in a 450 square house. And then that 450 square house isn't serviced by running their stormwater out to the road. It's actually done through a pit in the backyard. That's all good. That's no worries. They get a bit of extra water through their yard. But then the owner decides to throw a second house on at 350 square metres, and that second house is also connected, its rainwater, to that same pit. So all of a sudden, the neighbour has inundation the likes that he's never seen before. And it's happening in Thompson Avenue, Mary Avenue, Stubbs Road, Poplar, Elm. It's happening on those slopes heading towards Karawatha Forest because we're not pushing people or people developing their properties to run their stormwater back to the street. So I agree with the increase in charges, but where's the protections that people expect their council to have for them when this infill starts to come in and we're charging infrastructure charges, but they're actually seeing inundation into their properties for the first time in big things where their sheds are getting flooded out and their homes are actually getting water inundation from their neighbouring developed properties?
So happy to answer that. So infrastructure charges, we charge for secondary dwellings. We would have charged for those particular developments that you're talking about. The protection really lies in the new planning scheme and making sure that we have updated policies to ensure those situations don't happen.
Well, they are happening. They're happening with greater frequency. And it's not just about granny flats, it's 2 entire 4-bedroom, 2 living area homes that have a roof line that is like no tomorrow, getting fed into a small pit that is 1.5 metres by 1.5 metres and then bubbling up and flowing into their neighbours' yards. So it's happening, and I would like to know whether or not the protections are there in the new planning scheme to protect my local residents from this continuing to occur, because people are gutted that they're getting water through their homes in big volumes for the first time ever, and they have no protection from council. It's just a person certified this, it's approved, it's within the code accessible thing, that's it, goodbye, have a good day. So I just want to raise that as a concern, and I'll continue to raise it as residents have more and more of this happening, but I just want us to look at this as where's the protection for a resident, because if I was reading this as a punter out there in Civilian Street, I'd be saying, but what's in it for me?
Through the chair, this policy has nothing to do with the matters that you're raising, but I suspect Dave Hanson has a view on it.
Yeah, through the chair, I've got a strong view that stormwater issues are the hardest to manage across the city in a whole heap of emerging development locations. So we have a planning scheme policy, I think it's number 5 within the suite of things, which is getting a wholesale refresh under the new scheme, because whether it's in a greenfield environment where you're trying to spread out pre-development flows into an adjoining property, and then the adjoining property is staying too wet over time that never used to stay wet before, we are seeing this play out everywhere. And there's a range of different responses that other cities have, like for instance, Brisbane allows a body corp to pump out, have a pump out situation, but we avoid that because pumps fail. And if that's the only mechanism to get water out of your property, that doesn't feel real flash to us either. So I want to take your examples away, if you can give them to me, and we'll test them against the existing and the proposed policy, because that stuff just has to work as best as it possibly can. There's a lot of elements of that discussion which is just an emerging new development front, which is problematic inherently in some ways. People don't necessarily want the direction of water to the way that it flows historically to change, but that's the nature of development. It does have to change it in some regards, but the test is can't get quicker, can't get worse, can't sort of have an unreasonable impact on a neighbour. And we see that happen from time to time, and we're always happy to get back in the trenches, literally, and work out what's going on.
Thanks for that, Dave. I've raised these 2 issues with the team, and there was no outcome other than they were approved, and that's that.
Thank you, Councillor. I've just got Councillor Wilcox, and I'll come back to you, Councillor Bradley, if that's all right.
Thank you. And I have some sympathy with Councillor Lane, because I have detention basins that are overflowing through properties, through clubs and that sort of thing as well. And inundation occurs, especially in my new developments, with it interfacing into the older developments and that sort of thing. And I just don't know that you'll ever get it completely right. But I just wanted to mention, I think it's great that we're doing this piece of work. And I think Dave kind of answered this for me. I was going to say, are we going far enough with these fees and charges to close the gap?
Through the chair, absolutely not even getting close to the gap. And we will continue to advocate for the state government, like we have for the last 8 years, and the new government, for them to review the infrastructure charges framework.
Okay, that's good to know, because just referring back to the last 6.1 on page 36 of it, there is a really good summary in there of the infrastructure investment in there, you know, stating that Logan's biggest burdens and hurdles are to overcome the future growth of Logan with the infrastructure delivery and stuff like that. So it's kind of like, you know, on one hand it's here and on one hand it's here. So I think we actually could have gone harder on some of these infrastructure charges personally, but it's a way forward, and hopefully we can actually keep progressing it and close that gap.
Just through the chair, one thing that's different since the last time this routine update came to council is we turned on the extra payment condition. So the gap will primarily get closed in the emerging communities area by us being able to charge for the extra infrastructure through an agreement with the developers. So we didn't have that last time this came. And we're now, those conversations are really quite live at the moment across a number of new developments. So that's the mechanism which we'll have to close it in the absence of the state just upping the charge.
All right, thank you, Councillor Wilcox. Councillor Bradley, you had another question?
Yeah, and I note that Dave said that it wasn't related to the report, what Councillor Lane said, but just with what you said about the policy, is there some mechanism going forward where those who are actually impacting can actually have an agreement with the property in front to direct their water out onto this, into the correct way?
Through the chair, a lot of these stormwater issues do result in easements having to get acquired if there's piped conveyance. The circumstances here are a little bit different, where the mechanism to control the stormwater is not a piped solution. It's really just a slow down solution before it, from what I gather, before it dribbles out over someone else's property. And those, whether they're a sullage pit or whatever you want to call them, drainage pit, they often get not poorly maintained over time. They silt up and they don't continue to do the job that they're asked to do, much like the bio-retention and the detention basins that we see as well. So they do require ongoing maintenance, often by a body corporate or by council, to maintain the functioning of them. Now, so it's a slightly different from what I think what you're suggesting, which is a legal agreement 10-year solution to obligate everyone to do the right thing. We don't always have that mechanism depending on what the actual infrastructure looks like in the ground. So.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Any further questions? No? Okay, we have a motion on the board. Do I have a mover? Councillor Lane, do I have a seconder? Councillor Russell? All those in favour? And I note that Mayor Raven has left the room. That has been carried unanimously. Okay. Councillors, do we have an EGB for Dave this morning? No, Dave, do you have any for us?
Through the chair, no, I do not.
Wonderful. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. All right. Well, that concludes the agenda for today. Does anyone have an EGB for our director? No. Dave, do you have any more for us? No. All right, I declare the City Planning, Economic Development and Environment Committee meeting of the 14th of May concluded at 9:47, and the City Lifestyle meeting will commence in 10 minutes at 9:57. Thank you, everyone.